In Europe, heritage is a big deal these days. And where are the Jews in all of this? When they go back to recover their heritage, where are the Jews? This is going to be a big issue that's going to come out very strongly when Eastern Europe is absorbed. And Poland is going to be the first place.
We were looking for a black and white cow, and the treasure's buried under that cow. You see, here's the map.
He's got the map.
You see, it used to be called Garbaska Street. Now it's Manushki. This was the family house, if you will. And my father and his immediate family and siblings lived in a rented house across the street.
Where's the treasure?
Now there's another map for the treasure, but that one
You're standing in a place that's filled with thick smoke, and you're smelling human flesh. You think of Detroit, but they're not making cars. And you don't know whether to go left and right, and the difference between life and death. And he's adding up. My dad, is very, very good with numbers, right? The next moment he could die. He's adding up the numbers in his head. 1 times 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 2. And at the end of that, he comes up with high, which is life. Now, how do you get that in that space? I'm not quite sure, but I think that's why he survived.
I had a teacher once said going to Poland for Jewish people is something like going to Mount Sinai or Jerusalem almost, in a certain way.
Up to now, I've always regarded this as being really a graveyard of a civilization that no longer exists.
We spent a lot of time on the bus on this journey in Poland to the hometown of our parents and grandparents. And the key issue for most of us is this: how deep are the Jewish roots in the Polish soil? Have they been cut off for good? Will they grow back with watering?
The presence of Jews in Poland is of mythological proportion today. It's difficult to walk into a restaurant and not see carp shadowski on the menu, Jewish carp. It's difficult to hear Polish music without hearing the strains of Jewish music. There was a mixture of our peoples that's so great, that's so underestimated, that people don't realize that 90% of American Jewry, which obviously comes from that part of the world, Eastern Europe, and particularly Poland, is really the product very much of Polish culture and that Eastern European culture. I often like to say we're much more Polish than we like to admit, and absolutely they're much more Jewish than they would ever want to admit.
In the 14th century was a Polish king, Kazimierz the Great. And he was intelligent enough to know that the Jews could do a lot of good to Poland. So he invited them, giving them specific protections. They were killing Jews at this time in all of Europe. So they couldn't go all over the country. They could settle only in particular specific parts. And one of these parts was the middle of the country, what is called Wielka Polska. This was the main part of Poland. It came from the west, or the southwest, of the Vistula, and then to Gombin.
Gombin life was a very nice little town. There was a lot of Jewish people concentrated in the main city. And we grew up very, very happy kids. We had our own school. It was a Polish school and was a Jewish school. You know, we had a good time.
We had our own synagogue. We had a private rabbi.
It was a beautiful synagogue, very old. It was more than 300 years old.
There was a bima in the center where the cantor would be chanting, and then the ark, an amazing, huge, intricate ark. That synagogue is still studied today for its architectural genius. Gombin's most famous son, Rabbi Abraham Abele ben Chaim Halevi, wrote the Magen Avraham in the late 17th century. The work, a commentary on the code of law known as the Shulchan Aruch, is studied in yeshivas and kollels throughout the world.
In the original New York Society, my uncle was kitchen, ja, gekauft, geschnitten, verkauft auf der Welt, dann verdient er.
My parents owned a movie theater, and it was shortly before the war, and my brother got the movie Ben-Hur, and he organized the children in all the villages to come and see the movie. And this was the last movie we saw in our theater.
Man hat verlangt zur Bibliothek, man kann auf Mittag gehen, man hat sich getroffen. So ist es das Leben. Es ist ein Gildsboys, keiner hat nicht gehabt kein Interesse. Also man nimmt nicht kein Jiddisch. In Gombin hat man das nicht gewusst. Ein Mädel, ich gewinne in Gombin, was hat Katzen gehabt nicht mit kein Jiddisch. Und sie gewinnen so schein wie die ganze Welt. Wenn sie will, also kann das nicht mehr rachsten. So hat ausgenommen in Uremsten. Als sie gegangen in die Kirche, also Schmaden, in ganz Gombin gestanden auf ein Place. Man hat geworfen Steine.
They were coming, these people, the poor people were walking for alms. Gombin was a little town, but it was known that the people help. So when it came a Saturday, they were staying near the door and waiting to be taken home as a guest. My father was waiting for the last, and sometimes there were one, there were two, there were three. Then nobody was taking them because there were a lot of them. So my father was taking them all home for a Saturday meal.
I remember as a child, the way they used to beat me up. I couldn't walk to a soccer game, and if they lost, they used to beat us up, and we had to run away before the game finished.
Sie haben kein Mut nicht lieb gehabt in Jeden. Kein Mut nicht. In a jüdisch Mädel hat gehabt ein Store. Hat sich gestellt allein, wo ist going? Und haben geschrien, kauf nicht bei den Jeden, Jeden sind ein Parchewart, Bin ich zugegangen, closer, zu dem Maaschuchen gestanden. Ich habe gesagt, Jaschik, bist du gerecht, als sie die kannst sie, als so viele Jungen, in unserem Scheinem, in der Steiß, in der suchst du so geht. Sagt also, ich kann, als ich halt das nicht stehen, hat man mich auch hergenommen. That's all.
My father, Michael Zelanka, one of the few surviving Gombiners, now lives in Florida. Like many of the second generation, I never knew my grandparents, aunts, or uncles. I grew up with the survivors of Gombin and considered them my family. I traveled around the country, gathering in their stories.
You're my friend. My friend. They're so sick. So many years. I wish I would feel like this, that I look good. I look good, but yeah. It's no more this what it used to be. No. Thank God. No, thank God, sure. I'm a lebt me zeg. Je was een leven is en meer niet doen. That's the way it is, Ben.
He looks good. He looks good, Minna.
Thank God.
How many years? Come in the street.
Okay, come on. Come on, Minna.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, Ben.
Take a good look here.
Dus ben ik. No.
You better believe it.
Huh?
You better believe it.
Must be about 79 or 80 years old, that picture. This is Michael and this is Ben. That's a surprise, Benny.
Huh?
Big surprise. Oh.
Du bist gewesen.
I was a strong boy.
Starke boy.
But he beat me up all the time, playing ball. Even in school, he beat me all the time.
I was the champ.
That's right, sure.
Ich habe Bashir von einer Lieder besucht. Das Lied hat geheißen, eine Vorstadt. Eine Vorstadt. Du hört man in der Vorstadt die Kartoffeln wachsen in den Feldern. In das schrecklich schein. Man hört in der Stimme, es wachsen Kartoffeln.
I think Poland is one of the worst countries in Europe for anti-Semitism. I think the church has a lot of responsibility. Amongst the leaders of the church, there is a new approach and an understanding of the wrongs of the past. But the Polish people bear a lot of responsibility for what happened. I mean, they were good Poles, but I think they were in the minority.
They came into Gombin about in the end of September. They got already a mayor, police, everything set up, and they started the reign of terror right away. After a week or two, they asked all the Jews to come to this market there. They told them they're going to be persecuted. They didn't hide anything. No work, no business, nothing. They are restricted. They have no laws. The Jews were actually always persecuted. So for them, it wasn't any news. But they did not believe that they're going to be killed in a mass way like the Germans did. From this market, from this new market, they brought them back to the city, and they put the whole Jewish quarter to fire. The synagogue.
We went there, they were staying with hoses. The people who were inside, they wouldn't let them out. And they tried to force the people in. And the next day, they announced that the Jewish people set the fire in their own synagogues. And they made a big fee to pay for it. And then they started taking you to work. They used to come into the houses. It didn't make any difference what time of day, morning or night. And the Germans are not very quiet either. They're very, very loud, very loud. You know, they got voices, each one like. So they selected a Jewish committee. They called the Judenrat. They told them every day how many people they wanted to supply to work. Sometimes you work 10, 12 hours a day. Of course, no food and no drink and no rest and no pay. And you were lucky if you came home in one piece. Many, many people didn't make it. They took, like the Polish farmers, they took them out from their farms and they sent them to the east, and they brought Germans from Ukraine and other parts to take over their land. So they had their problems too, you know. The next thing was they took older men, and we were sitting in the fire department buildings all night, all day, without food, without drinks. And you try to change the position because you get tired sitting in one place and you just move. And so you raise yourself a little. You got a bullet between your eyes. And many people during that night got shot and killed.
This was the first night of this cleaning out of Gombin. And in the morning,
they came with trucks to take us away. And I saw from a distance, my sister was running, had a couple packages, you know, change of underwear, pair of socks, the last piece of bread from her mouth and the babies, you know, to give it. So she went over to this guy who she probably went to school with, Sagan was his name. And maybe she had lunches with him or dancing in school, whatever. And the guy beat her up. She was a Volksdeutsch, a German who was born in this country, you know. And he wanted to show he's a good policeman. He became a policeman. So I tried to jump off the truck. Didn't care what happened to me. I couldn't see him beating my sister. But they pulled me down because they knew what's going to happen. We were surrounded with an army. So much military, oh God. Anyway, we went to Konin, and that started the real problem. The real trouble started there.
Our tour made an important stop before Gombin to the windy hill at the top of the Konin Catholic Cemetery, where the mass grave of Jewish slave laborers from the Konin camp lie. The Nazis had them dig their own graves and then shot them all. Rabbi Aronson, also a slave laborer, insisted on burying their names in bottles. This is how I know that my grandfather, Shoah Bear, is buried here.
Who knows when someone was here last? And who knows when was the last time someone said Kaddish here? So keep in mind, those souls are here, that's the whole idea.
Munchik Leib mi Gombin, Lipschitz Shlomo mi Gombin, Motil Yaakov Leib mi Gostinin, Shlang Moshe mi Gombin.
Began Eden te menuchatam, lechein ba'al rachamim, yastirem etzetek knafav leolamim.
In April 1942, a few months after taking us out, sending us away to the camps, they put together the rest of the Jews. All the women, all the children, all the girls, all the old men, and they loaded them onto trucks and they built them around so they are very tight. And they put the exhaust pipes into the cars. So when they were taking the people supposedly to Chelmno to work, they came to the place, they were already dead. So this is how they disposed of the Gombin Jews.
Their gold teeth and jewelry were removed. Their bodies were burned. My beautiful Grandma Dina and Uncle Chaim, the young Beitarnik, their bones and ashes mixed together with hundreds of thousands more.
It was a big mess. There were stores here, they sold animals here, there were livestock everywhere. For 50 years, we thought there was absolutely nothing on this land. Now we know that there are so many things in the earth here: clothing, work tools, ritual objects, not tens, not hundreds, not thousands of objects that just jump out of the ground.
Only about 50 years ago, they did not distinguish between left and right, between secular and observant, between Hasidim and the people of intelligentsia, between the simple man and the great rabbi. There, everybody with Jewish blood in his veins shared a common fate. But as one survivor once said, what we need is not one day to remember, but one day to forget.
Gott hat behalten sein Tun. Das ist die Nummer von dem Bier. Gott hat weggedreht das Spunen, soll nicht dafür sehen, wenn wir hergetan. Alle Wegen haben geführt zum Tod. Alle Wegen. Alle Winden haben geutelt mit Verrat. Alle Winden. Auf alle Schwellen haben gebildet, weise Hint. alle Schwellen. Alle Wassern haben uns ausgelacht. Alle Wassern. Alle Nächte sind fett geworden von unserem Schreck. Alle Nächte. Und die Himmeln sind gewesen nackt und leidig. Alle Himmeln. Gott hat behalten sein Tun.
Yedidia is 13 years old, born in Jerusalem, and we're now in Poland, near Gombin. I'm Yedidia's father. I was born in Chicago, came to Israel in 1971. This is my mom. I'm born in Chicago.
Violet Wind.
And born in Chicago, and my mother's mother is right here in the big picture, and this is my grandmother's parents who were born, raised, and lived and were buried in Gombin. And my mom say something.
We are fortunate enough that our families will continue to grow, and their family was all wiped out.
Finished.
The end.
Finally, on a beautiful summer morning, we arrive in Gombin.
Shoah, we are going to start a tour of Gombin. Our guide is going to be the distinguished president of the Gombin Landowners Association.
Out of 7,000 people that are living in Gombin, 2,200 people were Jewish and 500 Germans. There were a lot of friends between Jewish and Polish people.
Czasem dochodziło do konfliktów.
But sometimes they had some argues because of the religious and material problem.
I was told like 2 weeks ago, people are real interested to see what the Jews look like. I'm going, oh, give me a break. We're going to go back to the zoo, and we're going to look at these strange people that are coming here. And then I realized that's not how it is. It's like, you know, there's a baby born, and you go to the relatives, and they know this baby is coming, and they're kind of excited, and the baby shows up, and they all flock to this baby. Oh, yes, and the nose is like Aunt Sarah, and the ears are like, and that's what my wife tells me. She says she's very anxious to see what these Jewish people looked like, because she hasn't seen any, and they lived here, and all the people talked about them.
Jest młyn, tak?
Moshe Bear.
Moshe Bear.
Yeah.
Moshe Bear. Widzi, tak? A Szmulek?
Yeah.
Żyje? Żyje Szmulek?
Is he still alive?
Szmulek Bear.
Shmulek Bear.
No.
No. Yes, my father is Michael Godela Bear.
And a person who knew my grandfather and then saw the picture of my father kept repeating 3, 3, 3, and somebody who interpreted for me said he can't believe 3 generations of the same face, my grandfather, my father, and I. And he was so excited. Look, you're just like the doctor. Just like your father is just like the doctor. You are just like the doctor. And they had a very positive feeling about it. No, we're just people. That's all. Just really all human flesh and bone people. And I felt very good about that.
Went up to one woman and asked her if she knew Władysławski. And she went, Władysław? Ah. And the interpreter said, yes, I went to school with her, and we did math homework together. And it was like, wow, this Gombin, it's like a heritage that I'm experiencing. These old people were very warm, very nice, very accomplished.
Właśnie był domek i oni mieszkali na pierwszym piętrze.
Thank you.
Na pierwszym piętrze mieszkali.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The whole thing is unbelievable.
Wie viel stitches undo?
Sehr schwer.
Was ist das sehr schwer?
Es ist alles Andenkung von den jungen Jahren von meinem Spruch. Das hat nicht mehr. Sehr schön gewesen, eine schöne Jugend gewesen, Gombin. Jetzt ist alles also traurig.
It was a great experience for her. It was like closing what it was left for so many years open. I think she even was able to see her family in her mind, especially her father baking and her younger sisters playing in the garden across the street from her house. It was this woman that we went to her house. They started looking at old pictures and they came across one of the pictures of this person, this man that my mom knew of him. She was told that he said where my mom's older sister was hiding. And they asked us if we wanted to keep the picture. And later that day, this man came to say hello to my mom. He knew her name. And my mom just went blank, white, and she looked at me. We turned around and we left.
As a grandchild of survivors, my role right now is as the last generation to hear what they have to say. I think for a while growing up, I was the only person who could talk to them because my mom would never ask them any of these questions. It was just assumed that their parents were Holocaust survivors. So you just never asked any questions.
Mulek, Anja i Sala.
Anja.
Patrz, Anja jest.
Anja.
That's your aunt?
Ale już nie, ja też nie pamiętam.
Yes, that's Anja. She's beautiful.
Anja.
She perished.
This is Samuel.
To jest Samuel. Here.
To są tyle lat,
It's a long time.
pozmieniane.
Many years.
Many years.
Yes.
Tell her thank you very much.
My chcielibyśmy Pani bardzo serdecznie podziękować.
Ask her one more question. Jak ciocia, lepiej jak ciocia.
A to mama zdjęcie.
Do you know Franco?
Franco.
They made caps. She was at the wedding of my mother's girlfriend.
Yes.
Okay? Ja i babuczka. I babcia.
Which one of them survived?
Kto przeżył? Ten rabin przeżył?
Jacob, the older son, the one that was doing watchmaking with his father, survived.
Aha, ten, który robił zegary z jego ojcem przetrwali.
Śpiewakówną to się kolegowałam, bo żeśmy mieszkali bliziutko z tym
She was
panem.
friend of
Tego pana
this
znam.
śpiewak. She was friend of śpiewak.
Tak.
They lived just like together.
Oh, together.
Yeah.
Oh.
Her mother has been shot here. No, her mother.
His mother
His
was
mother.
shot right here?
Yeah.
Nie tu, nie.
When they took them to the camp.
Do you remember Mas?
Pamięta pani Mas?
Volksdeutsch. Mas shot her. Mas shot her.
Mas, ja nie pamiętam, panie, to jest
Can't
tyle
remember.
lat. Ja bym sobie musiała przypomnieć troszkę, tak.
In that place, my mother wanted to talk to that German Mas, who was our friend. And as I figured out, she tried to bribe him. And he agreed. So he let her go, and she gave him something. And then when she gave this, he shot her, he killed her. When I came back to Gombin, they told me that one of these Germans is in the camp where the Poles arrested a lot of them after the war. And he supposedly is in that camp. And I went to the police and I told them I am Jacob Spiewak, I'm from Gombin. My mother was killed here on this day and so forth. And he is supposed to be Mas, and that German called him. And he brought this man in, and I recognized him, he recognized me. And that Pole asked me, what are you waiting, what are you sitting? It means an invitation, go ahead. Do whatever you want to do. It's your man. But a Jew, what can a Jew do? I'm going to go what? I'm going to jump with a knife, I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to do. Did I ever kill a man or hit a man too? So what I did, they pushed me on top of him, and once we were on the floor, they took that man and they worked on him, and they made a homage out of it. He stood trial, and they hanged him. They hanged him not because of my mother, but they hanged him for other crimes.
We were on the bus riding from Plotzk to Gombin when Ada Holtzman took the PA system and told us the story that she had done some research on some matseva that had been recovered in Gombin. There was some rebuilding that had gone on, and I think back in 1998, they had uncovered them as part of the roadworks. They decided to put them into a warehouse and leave them there. Many of them are fragments. Others have names that you don't know who they are, with no particular dates or anything. And at some point on the bus, she started to read a list of names of the matseva that she could make out. And she said,
and there is the tombstone of Pinkus Chaya.
It was like a shock. We were just kind of stunned. I've obviously heard about Pinchas. I heard the story of his death from my mother, but there was no reality to it. It wasn't a real person to me. I never connected with him. And the real story of our family, of course, is that his death is what kind of saved the family.
Had gekriegt einen Hack in der Fiese auf ein Kind. In Polen war dann also eine schwere Schulung getan. Hat den Ball den Bein zerbrochen. Aber ich umgeriert, habe ich gesehen, das Hitz. Das ist nicht mehr Karte, das ist nicht mehr Telefon, aber ich genommen auf mir, ich habe ihn gegangen zum Doktor mit.
He was taken to the hospital in Plotzk, and in Plotzk he died. I mean, it could have been like an osteomyelitis. I mean, it could have been something that really was related to the injury. There's really no way of telling. My mother smuggled the body out of the hospital rather than leaving it there and having, I don't know what, go on. I think in about 1937, my father decided that he was going to go to Uruguay to try to make a new life for himself. His brothers had emigrated to Uruguay before him. I was born in Uruguay. We eventually went to Uruguay, obviously, but when the word reached my father that Pinchas had died, he wrote that they should come immediately to Uruguay. And in the winter of 1939, my mother and Evelyn left Gombin. When she left, she was worried that the grave would be forgotten. And my grandfather promised her that he would erect a matseva to the child. She never saw the matseva because she left before the one-year anniversary. She actually never knew about this matseva. The war then breaks out in September. They were already gone then, and they survived. So the story of Pinchas's death was always linked to the survival of the family. Of course, when we got to Gombin, as soon as we could, we went down Kilinskega Street, since we knew where the cemetery was. And then we saw the lapidarium with all the stones. It was actually hard to find his stone. And eventually, of course, we found it. And I have to admit, it was really kind of a magical moment. When I touched that stone, I really felt as though I was touching my brother. The next day, we went back and we made the rubbing. And then I had this thought, that of all the stones that should survive is the stone of an 8-year-old boy, survives the Nazi Holocaust. That matseva was there for us to find. We were there to make this connection. And his memory has survived through us.
I've often wondered, what if World War II hadn't happened? This might be me. This might be my neighbors. This might be the place where I grew up. I don't know what kind of farmer I would have been. I don't like there. So there's always a silver lining in everything. But getting back to this gamut of experiences, on balance it was positive, but in taking the tour and walking to the cemetery with Isaac Zelanka, who was from Israel, and he was our oldest member, and he grew up here. First time back after 60 years, he saw number 22. And he got so excited because it belonged to his family. And he went into the yard, he met the people who lived there and talked. And the people next door kind of came down. And at first I thought, wow, isn't this nice? But then the interpreter said that some nasty things were being said by the people next door, basically, and that we should leave.
Particularly pleased to find 2 more matsevot. Two of the townspeople came forward and told us where we could find these stones. I would like to appeal to the people of Gombin that if you know of any further stones, and you would be willing to help us return them to the cemetery, we would be extremely grateful.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Dzień dobry, panowie i panie.
First, I would like to invite my fellow Gombiners who are standing outside the fence to know that they are welcome to come in and join us.
Na wstępie chciałbym zaprosić wszystkich, którzy stoją w tyle, przyszli tutaj i uczestniczyli razem z nami.
I have been thinking about this day for several years now, and I still can't believe that I am here.
I wciąż nie wierzę, że jestem tutaj.
That we are here.
Że wszyscy jesteśmy tutaj.
Really here.
Naprawdę tutaj.
This journey began for me not in childhood. I never thought about coming here as a child. But several years ago, my brother told me about an organization of Gombin descendants, and we meet using computers on the internet.
Our collaboration is a true example of the spirit of tolerance and mutual respect that can inspire the reunion of Poles and Jews.
We have come to honor our forefathers, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. We have come to restore to them their dignity and to save them from the disrespect that they have suffered for so many years. And by doing so, we have restored to Gombin one little drop of the Jewish people that were here for so many centuries.
I started by saying that I cannot believe we are here, but we are here. All of us together, descendants of Gombin. A miracle has happened here. Thank you, each and every person here today, for all of you have done to help to make this happen. Let the healing begin today.
There are some feelings of resentment. There are some fears about coming and taking property, but they're really very small. I don't think we have any real fears that the cemetery is going to be completely vandalized. We're afraid that somebody's going to write Jude, which can be erased. You have to see it within some form of proportion. Yes, there is anti-Semitism, but what kind of anti-Semitism?
The cemetery, I was there in the wartime. When I passed with the army, there was like digged in like graves. They took out all the stones with everything. They used to make sidewalks of them. Who did it? The Polacks did it. Not the Germans, the Polacks did it.
I mean, I could go back and I could say to the people who are living on the land where my grandmother's house used to be, I could tell them, this is my land, I want it back. But what am I going to use it for? I mean, I live here. I have no use for land in Poland. To do it just for the money, to sell it back and do it for the money is just not something I want to do. I want to remember it as my grandmother's home, my great-grandfather's home, as it was. I think revenge and retribution are just, there's something that we need to move past.
When you look at it from the point of view of the Poles, only 2 or 3 were very interested. But in the process of doing it, the entire village gets involved, and you end up with hundreds of people there. And for all of them, it is a personal experience that brings them closer to beginning to think and understand, to think about what happened.
In terms of what else is there left to do in Gombin, there's 1,001 other tasks we could undertake. And there's a lovely passage from the what we call the Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avos in Hebrew, which says broadly that the day is long and that the work is hard and that the taskmaster is an exacting taskmaster. But it's not your job to finish the work. It's simply your job to do what you can in the course of time. And others will come after you who will finish it off. We've completed this stage, but there will always be more to do.
What are you drinking there?
This is a single malt scotch. It's called Aberlour. It's not my favourite scotch. It's a little on the sweet side, but we've drunk a lot of whiskey since we got here, and I'm not complaining.
The projects were complete, but our journey wasn't over. Here in Warsaw, the former center of the Jewish world, the past meets the present as we discover Jewish life on a small but growing scale.
Some people from our family came here. Abraham Zamos, who was at that time the president of the community, he was arrested briefly at the beginning by the Germans, and then they freed the leaders of the community, and most of them came to Warsaw.
Moshe Zelanka, who was the brother of my grandmother from Gombin, who was a fighter in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. He died in 1943 here.
What do you build your identity on? Do you build it on Treblinka or do you build it on Sinai? If you build it on Treblinka, then there's no end to the problems. Because then, by definition, we cast ourselves in the role of perpetual victims, untrue, and we turn our back to everything to which Treblinka was an answer. Because in a way, Treblinka was a belated answer to Sinai. It was a rejection of the moral code. It was the rejection of the idea of a commandment, of a mitzvah, of an obligation that human beings have to each other and to their Creator.
And several Jewish families in Warsaw got together and said, we need a Jewish kindergarten. Our children have no idea, except from us, what it means to be Jewish, about Jewish history, about Hebrew language. And they started on their own initiative and then invited the foundation to help support these efforts. And so in 1989, Lauder Jewish Kindergarten started. As the director of a school where I see life all the time, I see Jewish art and I hear kids speaking Hebrew and I see them struggling with interesting issues. But I think when people say, well, the strength of the Jewish spirit can be found in Auschwitz, I wouldn't argue. But if you don't acknowledge that the strength of the Jewish spirit is found in a Jewish child in Warsaw or in Wrocław and Kraków and Gdańsk, then I think we're missing a piece of our own history.
My ancestors in this country didn't sit here in a shtetl waiting for a pogrom or for the Shoah, right? They helped build this country. They created an incredibly rich culture. From religion to secular literature, okay? From the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin to secular high schools, you name it. An entire civilization. And frankly, if I were to tell my son, be Jewish, because had you been Jewish 60 years ago, they'd have killed you. This is no reason to be Jewish.
It is impossible to light a candle for lack of air. You understand? They had not even enough air to breathe. So forget about food, water, ammunition, medicine. Air was important for them.
I mean, the Talmud teaches us you cannot deprive the living to feed the dead. Which means, for example, that if there's only so and so much money, and the choice is between maintaining the cemetery and building a school, you build a school. It's not that maintaining the cemetery is not important, it is. But the living are more important than the dead.
What we're doing is giving people back their inheritance. It was taken away by many, by history, by the Holocaust, by the communist government, by fear. And if we can restore that progression, then we're on our way. I'm hopeful this is just the beginning.
Original Wailing Wall of Warsaw. This is original, the height and this part. So touch it and let's have a short moment for contemplation. brick here, it is in Yad Vashem in Yerushalayim, and this one is in Melbourne. Follow me, back to the bus. Come on! To the bus! On the bus or to the bus? On the bus.
They wanted us to bring the tombstones from Gombin here. Do you remember? That's what they wanted. They didn't want us to redo the cemetery, to reclaim the cemetery. They wanted us to bring the tombstones here.
Growing up, we spent a tremendous amount of time with the Gombin children and Gombin activities. And for many years later, even though we all spread out to different parts of New Jersey or different parts of the country, I feel a lot of the Gombins, the only people they trusted were other Gombins.
We went to West Orange Mountains in the fall, and we would picnic. And in the summertime, we went to the beach, and we all went together. And we remained friends for our entire lives.
As a young child in the 5th and 6th grade, thinking to myself, how would I feel if 90% of my family was suddenly gone? How does one continue? The emphasis in our family was to work and move ahead and leave the other memories behind. But other things are probably left behind as well.
All I've experienced is the hollowness of my parents, the vacuum of pain that's unspoken. And only now, you know, because they're in their 80s, are they starting to talk about it. And yikes, it's a little late.
And sometimes my father would start screaming at night. I mean, shrieking. He'd be dreaming. At one point, I remember he was doing it very frequently, like maybe once a week for like 6 months or so. And I used to hear him shriek. It was very horrifying. So that kind of affected me, and very strangely, it got into me, and I started doing the same thing years later in life, where I would wake up screaming.
I never told my kids when they were younger, because I wanted to raise them normal kids. I didn't want them to pay for the time I suffered, or we as Jews suffered.
When I was very young, I found the photos that are now in the back of one of those photo albums, and I guess I must have been about 6. And my dad yelled at me. And I saw pictures of the hangings and the ovens, and he instantly grabbed the photo album out of my hands and said, I don't want you to see that. And at the time, I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know what it was associated with. But it never left my head.
He got life. We got one life. He's got his wife, he's got his kids, he's got the sisters, he's got his father now. But I had them. But I had another life. I had 2 lives. And I could not live one without the other. I could never forget them.
My father, there just wasn't a minute in his life that you didn't feel it radiating from him, the sadness, the loneliness. And when I was in Gombin, I really thought if I could bring back some of his family, maybe he'll rest in peace. So that's what I did. Every place we went where there was another place of killing, I tried to bring home a little piece, since we don't really know where his family went. One's from Gombin, one's from Chelmno, and one from Konin. Yeah. Gonna spread the dirt down and put the rocks up there, and hope it helps.
My parents worked very hard and wanted everything for the children. So I was thinking how they did everything for us, and here I am alive and could not do anything to them. So I was really very sad when I came back to Gombin.
You don't sleep, you dream. I fell out from the bed hundreds of times. It's a very big struggle to go around what we went through.
I've heard other people say growing up in homes of alcoholics, like they know they're not supposed to talk about what happens. You know, as an adult, I think, well, maybe it would have been healing if we could have talked about it. But as children, you just knew that that wasn't something we could do.
My father had a tragic ending. My father committed suicide. In the last year of his life, his nightmares were getting stronger and stronger. He distrusted everybody, accused my mother of different things. He was very unsure of himself, and it was shortly thereafter that his life ended. What would I say to my father today? Thank you for all you taught me. Thank you for being there. And I'd like him to see my children.
At the end of the journey, I realized that only our generation could begin to heal. The elders couldn't do this. Their pain is too great. We needed to close the circle for them and for ourselves, to find our roots and plant the seeds of hope.
Punkt wie man hat das Wasser drin, also muss ergens sein auf Gott, ein Stillkelch, was man muss öffnen. Wie man hat eine Harmonie zwischen den Punen, in den Haaren, in den Augen. Wie man hat auch dann an den Tuchen in Gott. Vielleicht verbrennt es. Er hat es nicht gedorfen ziehen, aber doch kommt auf den Sinn. Gott ist einer und weiter keiner.
It will take more than 55 years. It will take more than 155 years to remove the myth of the Jews, the presence of the Jews, the shadow of the Jews.
The past is gone. The present is only today. And the future is tomorrow. And I'm always looking for tomorrow. And it helps me a lot.
The Gombiners, the elders, didn't want to have anything to do with Gombin itself, this memorial at the cemetery. I'm proud of what we've done. We've done a lot of work. We've accomplished a lot.
I know only this thing, if to tell anybody anything, is we paid a terrible price, but we have now is Israel. I hope that Israel is going to stay, going to be a Jewish country.
Because you are Jew, halt nicht auf den Kopf, halt auf den Kopf. Be alive, fight by your life. Life you have to fight. And to normal life you have to fight too, that's life. You fight too weak. And I bury Hitler, and I'm here, and I'm talking with you. That's the main thing, and that's gonna be.
From the time of the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 of the Common Era until 1967, the greatest, most dynamic, most populous, strongest, most productive Jewish nation in the history of the world was located in the borders of what is today Poland. 2,000 years we were formed as a people in that land.
It's not just about the memorial, it's not just about a monument anymore. It's about people. It's about the people who are here now. It's about us remembering and at the same time bridging this gap that was destroyed. The relationship that the Jewish community had with the Polish community was destroyed. We've already seen what hatred can do. We need to create something better than that.
Schlaf meine Kinder, mein Tröst, meine Schöne,
Schlaf meine Sühne nu. De besta Kind noch schlaflesato. Schlaf schein ei lulu. In Amerika dein Tate, schlaf meine Sühne nu. Brieveler wette von dorten schreiben, schlaf schein ei lulu. Dorten esst men in der Wochen Challe Sine nu. Ja, chaler will ich dir dorten kochen, schlaf schein ei lulu.